Are we live? Let's see if it's working. Let's see. Checking. Come on, YouTube. Work. It's working. Hi, everyone. This is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. And this is the Pens and Portal segment of my channel, which is a pretentious way to say that I have people coming on my channel and I use it as a way to coerce them to stay a little bit with me and talk about books, especially science fiction and fantasy books. And today I'm really happy, I'm honored to have a special guest, which is an Italian guy. And you see by the surname, he is Michele Amitrani. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you for having me, Abel. I'm very happy to be with you today.
I'm really honored because, as I've told you, this is a specific way that I engineered to have an excuse to spend people with that love talking about books and write books. And this is a really special occasion for me because I have talked briefly about one of your books at the beginning of my journey on BookTube, which was one of your techno thrillers. And things have been evolving. You've been publishing constantly during the last 1.5 years since I talked about that book. So we're going to talk about the things that people can actually buy right now that you've written in English, of course, because you're publishing in Italian and in English, a little bit on the same way I did. Actually, far better because you've been publishing much more things in Italian, but there's a good back catalog of stuff that you've been publishing in English, and that our followers, my followers and readers, could potentially check out, either in about techno thrillers and science fiction and fantasy. So I send you a lot of questions. I don't think we'll have time to uh, talk about all of those questions. I like to be ample and to try and experiment. But let's start at the beginning. Let's start about your journey as a reader, maybe a little bit at the beginning. And when did you started to be a reader? Were you in a family of readers? Were you the odd sheep in your family? And then we'll talk about a little bit of your writing journey. Okay, the stage is yours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was part of a family of science fiction readers, especially my grandparents. They were actually readers of science fiction, Asimov, Heinlein, these kind of things. And I did enjoy that in my teenage years. I used to read a lot of Asimov. I believe I read around 15 to 20 of his own novella, short story, and
Yeah,
novels. So that is part of the bedrock of my, let's say, of what interests me, of the things that I want to write when it comes to science fiction. Part of it, and then, of course, I try to evolve. And in time, I also realized that, unfortunately for me, I like to write several different genre. So maybe we'll touch about that later. But I don't only write science
absolutely.
fiction; I also write fantasy, and that is a bit of a problem, especially when you want to cultivate your audience. As
Yeah,
you,
absolutely.
I believe that by yourself, you experience that firsthand,
Yeah,
because I've also followed your journey as an author when you were publishing in Italian. Now you are mainly focused on the English side of things,
yeah.
but you experienced several different genre, so
Yeah.
you kind of know where I'm coming from, I
It's a
believe.
struggle. It's not easy. Yeah,
Mm, exactly, but I also believe that we are both self-published author, so we have a bit more of a leeway when it comes to marketing. We can do things that the legacy or traditional published
hmm,
folks can't really do. If possible, and when possible, we can adapt a bit more quickly. But overall, the not very sound marketing decision that I undergo was to just write and publish on several different genres. That's why,
Mhm.
to answer your question, I did start as a reader of science fiction, but then I evolved into fantasy and especially some subgenre of fantasy. And again, if you want, we will talk about that later.
Of course. So, what were your favorite authors outside Asimov and Heinlein when we touch about a little bit about fantasy? Because readers, you will see you have many things, and you touched a little bit upon that. But the big classics, those were your beginning. But what about fantasy?
When it comes to fantasy, you have your average Tolkien. So when the Lord of the Rings was released, first I actually saw the movies and I really enjoyed them. And the movies were a gateway to the books. So I
Mhm.
first saw the movies and then I enjoyed the books. So Tolkien was definitely one of my gateways to the fantasy genre. Um, After that, I just went and explored a bit of further on the dark fantasy subgenre. So you will have your Martin, J.R.R. Martin. I also went into the phase of I read all the Harry Potter books, of course. This, I would say, it's the beginning and the starting point of my fantasy journey. But then you can say that this is really the basic platform, and then from here on the journey of discovery of more specific author that are actually more in line with my personality and the way I like to write really started. So someone like Stephen Pressfield, for example, which
Mhm.
is big on the historical fiction, and I would also say like the mythological fantasy genre. Like one of my favorite books is Gate of Fire, which is
Mhm.
basically a retelling of the fight of the 300 Spartans and the Greek
Okay.
allies against the Persians. That is historical fiction, but there are some things that for me can be classified as mythological fantasy. And then someone else that I really like as uh, fantasy, mythological fantasy, historical fantasy writer is Madeline Miller, which she's the
Okay.
author of Circe and the Song of Achilles.
Song of Achilles. Mhm.
S- these are some more specific oriented author
Mhm.
that I enjoy reading nowadays on the fantasy
Mhm.
genre.
I have Jim Butcher with the Coda Lexera on my TBR. It has been there for around 5 years or more, because I think that that mixture of epic fantasy with mythological retellings, Greek history, or maybe Roman history, and I'm not that sure, but the covers are a little bit confusing depending on which one you look at. I think there are at least 5 books on that series or
Hmm.
more. And of course, Jim Butcher is known for
The Dresden
um,
Files.
urban fantasy usually, but yeah, that one I need to talk. And it has an interesting story because it was kind of a bet. Someone told him he didn't have the actually the guts to publish that book because it was kind of a joke to write an epic fantasy with Pokemon with
Roman
because they
Empire,
control
The Last
beasts.
Legion. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And then he did.
I'll definitely give it a try. So these were your origin story, your evil villain origin story, okay? But where did you decide to try and publish your story? What did um, the first spark, the idea for your first story came? Was your first idea the first book that you published, or did you go the usual way to kill the first book that you ever rewritten and then try to publish something else? Explain that.
The story and the journey is a bit of a complicated one, so I'll shorten it up as much as I can. So I actually started writing and publishing my first book, which wasn't a novel. It was an essay on the development of the People's Republic of China. So it was actually an economical essay. And I published that in 2010. And that was an experience, but it was when self-publishing of this age was really coming along. So there weren't a lot of things. There was basically nothing I really know. So I really knew about that. So what I did was just writing something that came from my university researches, and I study international relations and politics. So that was the first thing that I decided to write and published, not through Amazon, but through an Italian, let's say it was an Italian website that allowed people to self-publish books. Maybe you heard about it. It's called Del Mio Libro.
Yeah.
So that was one of the very first examples of this. But the very first time I self-published a story was actually a short story, and it was a science fiction one. And it was related to ecology and the use of resources. So it was fiction, but it was, again, taking from my resources on what I've learned about economics and culture and that kind of things. Fast forward from 2011, 2010 to 2014, this is the year when I actually published my first novel, which was called Oniologo, which you are familiar with, and which was a science fiction novel in Italian. So this was the beginning phase of my writing and publishing journey. I always self-published my books. I never really considered the option of traditionally publishing it because I was interested in keeping and owning whatever I decided to publish out there. So I made that decision from the very beginning, with a lot of bad things attached that happen, because when you do that, you have to realize that you come into a special region in which if you do something that actually doesn't work, you pay consequences. You don't have an agent, you don't have an editor. So everything that happens to you, all the things that you have to remember is that if you want to be a self-published author, you really have to develop a thick skin. And you know this maybe better than most because you also published some of your books, I think, at the beginning through a platform called Wattpad, and you get a lot of feedback from there. And you yourself said in the past when we were talking that you have to develop a thick skin, because you get some feedback that are usable, that are actually genuinely useful, but some of them, maybe most of them, are designed to unmade you. So that's your editor. That's your agent. That's how you learn things. You learn things through reviews. When the book is already out and you find out there are typos, then your character are not really relatables. All this stuff, you find it firsthand. And I'm not saying that it's the best thing to do. I'm just saying that if you really want to own it, own the successes and own the failures, then it might be something you might be interested in considering. So this was the first phase. From 2014, when I published the first book in Italian, until 2017, when I published the fourth book of this science fiction series in Italian, that was the first phase of my self-publishing journey. It was a very dark period. It was very dark.
The dark ages of Michele Amitrani.
It was definitely a dark age. So you would come like in any story, there is like the beginning, the middle, the messy middle, then there is the dark side of the soul, and then that was definitely that part. In that I didn't really have any results. I was just keeping writing, publishing without really understanding all of the things that you know are attached to the self-publishing thing. And then in 2017, I took a few months off because I decided to go in Southeast Asia, and I spent there more than a month. And after that, I got sick. I
Mm.
got sick for a period of time. It wasn't like 1 or 2 days, it was several months.
Mm.
So that made me reevaluate what I wanted to do with this thing. Like, was it really worth it? You are
Mhm.
spending hundreds of hours in order to build
Exactly.
these things, and you, most of the time, what you get back are feedback, and many of these are helpful. But if your objective is to be read by somebody else, many people are discouraged by all
Yeah.
of these step by step procedure that doesn't really guarantee you to get anything at all.
Mhm.
So it was like I tried to understand what I wanted to do, and every single time part of me was just trying to be objective and said, I think you should kind of give up, or maybe not do it as seriously as you have been trying to do, at least without result, because you've been failed. You have
Mhm.
been failing many times. Maybe just leave it on the side. It's just your hobby. Like, it's not something wrong. Like, there are many people that play a guitar and are not going to have any concert anytime soon. There is no shame in that. Any single time I had that conversation with myself, I was very sad and I was very upset. So from that point on, I started to getting a bit better health wise. And at that time, I was living in Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I decided to make the switch and stop writing in Italian and start writing in English. Since I was there, I was learning the language a bit better. I was reading more material that was in that language. So that would be the second phase, if we want to call it like this, since the Avengers made it famous, the phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 kind of
Yeah.
things. So what I started to do from that point on was to really try and work on my craft, but no longer writing in my story in Italian, but in English only. So that became my language of choice when I was writing anything,
Okay.
novella, short story, novel. I would write that in English. And then if I thought that maybe my Italian audience would like it, I would translate that into Italian. So let's speed up, and let's say the third phase was me starting a bet with myself. I did this in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. I
Mhm.
decided to write one story every month in 2020 and give it for free,
Okay.
just for because I wanted feedback, right? I wanted to try and understand if these things that I was writing were actually interesting, because I didn't know up to that point. So
Mhm.
what I did was the 12 by 20 challenge, as I called it, and I just gave away for 2020 one story. It might have been a
Every
short
month.
story, a novella, a novelette, every single month for 2020. And based on the feedback that many people that were kind enough to write these stories gave me, I understood that were some kind of stories that were resonating with a particular part of the audience. And again, when you give stories for free, of course, you have potentially more readers that can read your stuff and can
Mm.
provide the feedback. You know the importance of ARC readers, but imagine that tenfold, because you are giving
Okay.
it without strings attached. You're just saying, okay, I'm going to give this to you. Please, if you have time, read it and let me know. And to my surprise, let's say most of the feedback were encouraging. Not all of them were positive, but were encouraging enough to let me understand that I wasn't writing crap in English. And some of the stories were actually interesting. So maybe some of the stories needed development, which I did when
Okay.
I rewrote them. But that was the starting point in 2020 and beginning of 21. In the beginning of 21, I started actually publishing some of these stories. And this is where the mythological fantasy series that I told you about started, let's say, started being published in English. And eventually that became 10 of them, 10 mythological fantasy novellas. And then after that, I decided to take back that Italian series that I was writing, that I wrote and published, and I decided to rewrite it with the things that I learned in Canada on the craft of writing stories. So I rewrote part of that story, of those 4 books, and I republished it starting 2022. So I republished that 4 books in the span of 4 months and a half in Italian, new covers, new blurbs. Some parts were changed, but not significantly changed. And what happened was that, strangely enough, like this second launch went way better than the first time, because it turns out that the feedback that the readers give you when it comes to story, it's really that important. And I believe that you know this to be true. You know how
Exactly.
much is important for your craft. So this is basically me in 2022 and 23. And then let's flash forward and close the phase 4, last phase in 2024. In 2024, I decided to translate the science fiction series into English, and that didn't went well. It went
Mhm.
very poorly because you realize that the English market is way more competitive, way bigger,
Absolutely. Mhm.
and it's something that I think you are realizing also with your experiment that you're doing. But I'm learning something, and in the long run, you always have to understand that if you have a book out there and this book was never really discovered by a reader, is always going to be new for that reader. So
Mhm.
you can always give this person the possibility to find it. So this is where I'm at now. I'm also publishing a new space opera in Italian, and I'm going to publish the second book in that series in 2 to 3 months. So this is the end of the phase when it comes to
This
the
is where
reading and
we
the
are now.
writing. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's a really interesting experience to share. I have been I'm just starting having guests on my channel, but everyone has a different approach to writing. They have different desires, but they also have different starting points. And what I see really often is that the ones that manage to stay on the market for a considerable amount of time, that keep fighting for their books, are people they have a really clear idea of what they want. And I think it's interesting for you about your experience is that that focus kind of became clearer and clearer the more you went on your way, on your journey, which with trial and error, and you shifted your focus. And as a reader, because I've been following you for many years, I've seen that change uh, in a really clear way. So, and I've read the first book of that space opera in that first iteration in Italy many years ago. But then when I saw the rebranding, I asked myself, why didn't I continue with that series?
Mhm.
And it could be that as readers, we need to have uh, for someone to push us to continue the series, because we have the enthusiasm and the desire to discover a first book in a series. That easy, but to continue with the series, that's much more difficult, because we have this avalanche of new stuff coming up and flashing over us, new and interesting books. We have the recency bias. We have a lot of things distracting us to continuing a series. And I think that that depends from us, from our really lack of our ability to maintain an attention span that allows us to read many books in a series. But it also depends on the work that publishing houses and independent authors do. I had a really interesting conversation with a singer an artist, a songwriter and singer, a couple of weeks ago. And he told me that the hardest lesson that he learned being a singer with a big label at the beginning of his career and then as an independent singer is that people will be enthusiastic about your work as long as you're enthusiastic about your work. So the more you take care about the way you explain and communicate and market your book, the more people will be. So it's not like, I don't think that saying fake it until you make it is it's the right thing to describe it. But if you manage to convey that kind of enthusiasm, if you make your book a big deal, people will read it as a big deal. And I've seen the difference between the first bunch of publication, the first phase of your journey, and the second one, and the one you're now. Your approach is much more different. You've been growing as an author and as a person and as a marketer for your books. And it is much more interesting now to see the way you're developing your stories, the way you're marketing them. I've seen that you had you have quite a popular booktube channel in Italian. It's an author-tube channel in Italian when you share about your experience as a reader, as an author. I'm sorry. And I remember that a couple of years ago, I was doing a job when I was traveling a lot, driving a lot. And there were this kind of blog that you had on your channel when you were talking about book sirens, about newsletters, and many things, NetGalley, all of that stuff that I knew absolutely nothing about because they were not that popular in Italian for the Italian market. So I see that you've been changing and growing as an author, but also as a marketer, and that makes this journey so fascinating. And the way you touched a little bit upon feedback, right? And I think that many authors, they fall right there. So they cannot manage criticism. And that's really sad. Even traditionally published authors, they can be really unapologetic about the situation, and because quite a few of the feedback we get can be really mean. you know it can be really difficult to swallow. And it's not like we have to justify people being mean when they do reviews that are clearly written to make you feel bad about your writing. But as I told you many years ago, when I was sharing my books on that social reading platform, either you try to use those awful criticism that were poorly written just to make you feel bad and try to make it useful, or you let it drown you and let it bring you down. Now I'm an old guy. I'm a big old guy, so I have the ability to filter out positive feedback, even when it's delivered in the worst way. But it's been a long journey to get there, to make it useful, to try and experience it in any kind of positive way. Okay. Even today, when I see a 3-star review, which is basically is a positive review, but it is written in a way that when someone is really trying really hard to highlight the bad side of that book, it's not easy to read that. And I know that many authors, they use a no reading reviews politics. So they see the average percentage, and that's enough to try and understand if the book is doing well or not. I'm still not to that level of unbothered in my life, but I think that it's been difficult, and it will continue to be difficult to try to filter out what is good in any kind of feedback and reviews. But it is essential, because many times, even if someone is writing a review that it's kind of an insult to you, that is basically saying that you should stop writing and do something else, sometimes there is something useful there. Okay, sometimes there is something really, really useful there. And I think that my experience with ARC copies, I have I have sent many, many ARC copies of the Crimson Fires in the last 1 month and a half. It's been really formative for me because you can filter out people that are genuinely willing to give you constructive feedback, things that will actually help you make your books better. Other people that just want you to be your friends and they're really sweet and they don't have the ability to actually convey any kind of criticism in a way that can help you, but because that's not their job, they're not editors, that they don't need to help you improve your novel. And you also understand when someone comes from a bad place. They have a bad place in their heart and they're just trying to say something. That there's this kind of mechanism when they try to bring you down, and it's in a way to make themselves feel better. There's many fucked up mechanics when you find yourself in that position. But let me try to share your website when we have beautiful covers about your many phases. We have the techno thrillers, we have a little bit of those mythological short stories and novellas. And yeah, let me see. This is your website, and let me see if it goes, if it works. Okay, so it is working, Michele. Do you see something?
I see
Okay,
everything. Yeah.
okay. So these are the techno thriller science fiction books. Do you want to give a little elevator pitch for this series? We have the first three books here on ebooks and paperbacks. The fourth one is only on ebook for now, and will probably in the near future come to paperback too. So let's talk about a little bit of this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about elevator pitch. I'm not very good in condensing a lot of information. That's why when it comes to blurbs, I am like a mess. I can't write a good blurb if my life depended on it.
Been there, done that. I understand.
So you understand that part. But basically, it is a techno thriller with adventure science fiction element. Doesn't really have a lot of the things that will make it a bit more popular. Hence why it's one of my first series. But it's more like it's around one main characters,
Okay.
which has a very big project for developing a particular side of humanity's civilization. There is a pushback against this project, and the reason why is going to be discovered slowly in the second, third, and fourth books. And with that, there is also, we can call it an antagonist that it's not really something that you might expect from the very first book, and that will try to contrast this big project that the main character is trying to build.
Okay. I have to say, these covers are beautiful. They're really effective.
I can't
These
take
are
credit for it. I can do some advertisement for 100 Covers, which is the website that built
okay.
this. It did take some work because you go with the back and forth of
Yeah.
suggestion and stuff, but it definitely it was worth it because they did an amazing job.
And there's a nice progression as the color palette becomes darker and darker, with especially with the third one, that it's has those sparks and the flames and the fire.
Yeah, they did
And
a great job.
yeah. That's incredible. We don't have the fourth one here, but I think it's kind of a spoiler because it moves the story toward another
From one
location there.
place to the other, yes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
it's
intended to
really
be that
nice.
way.
Exactly. A nice job to the guys to. It's 400 covers. Did you said on the
100
website?
covers. The 100
Okay.
covers. Yeah.
We'll try to make a link in the description box. So now we have a free story here that it's for whoever wants to join your newsletter,
Mhm.
and it's called Woman of Destiny, and we have a quite a lot of short stories and novelette, you said.
Mhm.
So do you want to introduce us to this collection of stories? How many do we have here? We have 6
So we
here.
have 6, but it's actually 10. I
Okay.
did not update the website, so my fault. It's uh, it's definitely on me. Those are easier to describe because they are between 15,000 and around 35,000 words. So it's in the novella kind of spectrum.
Okay.
And they are basically a retelling of very famous myths. You will see
Mhm.
the first cover, it's a retelling of the Medusa myth.
To do so.
The second one is the retelling of the Titan Prometheus. Muse of Avalon is a retelling of the muse Calliope. Then
Okay.
we got a Shion of Gaia or Shion of Gaia, which is a retelling of how the underworld came to be and how the queen of the underworld actually became the queen of the underworld. King
Mhm.
of Defiance is a retelling of the Sisyphus myth, and Song of Forever speaks about Orpheus, and it's another retelling that is based into the underworld. So all of them were kind of easier
Mhm.
to write, both because they were shorter, but also because the plot was already
Okay.
made, because the
Mhm.
mythological fantasy, it's already the fantasy and sorry, the myth is already there. You just have
Mhm.
to rewrite it or rework it in a different way.
Okay, nice. So these are. Do you have box sets for this series or
I have
not?
a box set which is not available on Amazon yet.
Mhm.
I have I want to make it available, but only if Amazon will comply with some of my need. Like I let's say that I don't agree 100% with the Amazon pricing policy of ebooks,
Mhm.
but there are other stores that allow me to price the books the way I want them. So the box set of those 10 mythological fantasies novellas are available on other stores like Apple Books, Google Play, and Kobo and others.
Okay, so this
So if
is
you, yeah,
really interesting. I think it's a good way to have a test of your writing and to see your sensibility, to see how do you structure plot and characters and all the rest. But and it's a win-win. If you like it, you have an interesting run ahead of you to read all of those. And let's talk a little bit about what you have in store for the future, right? So you have the first phase, which is techno thrillers and science fiction. Then we have this um, string, this series of mythological retelling. And then we have something in store for the near future, right?
yeah. So first, I just want to, let's say, add something. You did very well in underlining the fact that I'm basically genre hopping, which is very bad. Like, especially if you want to do this for a living, you are not suggested to do this.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you very simply why. Because especially in the self-publishing genre, in the self-publishing realm, in the province of
Mhm.
self-publishing, you are trying to basically what you're trying to do is to build an audience that are interested in a kind of story. Okay, then once you have this catalog of books, you can explore maybe other genre, but you have to have your catalog of like 10, 15,
Yeah.
20 books in that genre. And then if you want, you can go experimental. I am
Mhm.
not doing that. I am basically shifting from one genre to the other, and it's not the best sound marketing choice, but it's just the
Mhm.
way I operate as an author. Okay, so
Mhm.
I just wanted to say this: it's not basically the best choice
Mhm.
when it comes to the marketing sides, but is either this or I probably not have the motivation to do what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. So
I've seen a
closing,
meme yesterday about reading and writing, and there was just doodles, no, little sketches, and there was someone asking, why do you spend that so much time reading and writing? And the answer was, it's either this or I'm screaming to my pillow. Okay, that's that's why that's how it worked for many of us. I think that as self-publisher, we have more freedom to try and choose how to organize our schedule, how to manage our PR the way we, because we try to build a little bit of a character for ourselves as authors, so that people can relate to what we write. And yeah, the most sensible choice will be to have a series of, not necessarily a series, but books that fit in a specific genre or subgenre. Because once you manage to carve out a little bit of a road for yourself, will be easier to attract those readers. It is also really true that if you have a really strong voice, if it is a really specific way to generate, to describe characters, to describe an internal monologue, if you put sentences in a really specific way, that will translate and will bleed out in any kind of genre that you write. So people that are really attached to you will probably follow to wherever you write. It is also true that readers who are really attached to a genre, they kind of frown upon too many other genres. SFF readers are pretty open to try different kind of stuffs because they're in this broad genre or fantastic story. There's science fiction or fantasy or of whatever. But if you start with science fiction, it will be difficult. It will be much more difficult to translate to other genres. While if you start with fantasy, then you can try something else. For example, I've been talking to one of the first, maybe the first author that I interviewed on my channel was Richard Swan, which is famous for his dark fantasy series, The Justice of Kings, and all the rest. And he said that his experience was actually as a self-publisher at the beginning, and his first love was science fiction. He didn't have enough of a success, and he was lucky enough to have a really interesting deal for his first book, because the book is incredible. The Justice of King is one of the best fantasy books that I have ever read. But he's planning to return to science fiction after 6 other books in the fantasy genre. He has enough of a name and on a platform. He has enough of street credits in the SFF community to try and do different things. So we can do whatever we want as self-publisher, but then, as you said, hey, we need to have this thick skin to try and pay the consequences because it makes the marketing difficult, harder, even harder than it actually is, just to market a single book in a single genre. It depends from the end goal. Okay, how fast do you want to try and make this, and to regain and to make a little bit of money from your books? How much time can you invest in pushing the quantity of books that you distribute, waiting to make some money with that? So everyone has a different strategy, everyone has a different goal. If we have just been pushed by this fire of passion and desire to share our story, any kind of feedback is good, any kind of paywall is good. But if we want to do it to have a little bit of satisfaction because we are investing so much money, so an incredible amount of money and energy, and we have to be a little bit strategic. I think you're doing an incredible job, a really good job, and that's why I'm curious about how you're approaching your next step. Okay, and that's why I was asking about your next step in the international market. So let's talk about a little bit of that. I'm searching the picture as you introduce your next endeavor.
In honoring the choice of making my life more difficult, the next series that I'm going to publish is going to be a dark fantasy fairy tale retelling, which is it's something that I actually started writing in 2020 when I was talking about the experiment of writing those 12 writing 12 novellas or short story in basically in 1 year. And so one
Okay.
of the stories that I wrote was actually what is going to be one of the stories that I'm going to release in the series of Shadow and Light, which is this new retelling of the fairy tale of Little Red Riding Hood,
Okay.
but with more of a, although these are three shorter books, similar to my mythological fantasy. So I believe the longest is like 23,000 words, so kind
Mhm.
of short. Um, they try and have both an epic fantasy vibe and a dark fantasy one. So I'm going again experimental and see how this goes. And I did this choice for two reasons. Reason number one was that uh, the story was already written, so all I needed to do was rewriting some part and then publishing it, and then I just needed to package it. So I needed the cover, which we both know who made that cover, those covers, very nice one. Abel did. He's a great designer, if you wanted to know. Um, and
I'm
and
involved.
he is involved in this project as well. And also the blurb. So all of these things are needed for the packaging. But once you have these things out of the way and you edited them, I have a very good person from the US that helped me editing these books. And although they are on the shorter side, I'm proud of them. I already sent the arcs, so hopefully people will like this new experiment. And the first book, which is, as you can see, Hunter of the Shadows, is going to be actually released tomorrow. So I'm excited for the launch. It's going to be available in all stores, and it's going to be, for now, at the promotional price of $0.99. Look what I'm doing, a bit of marketing in the interview. And then I'm going to release the second book in what's called in the self-publishing world rapid release. So
Mhm.
not that fairy tale, which is the second book, is going to be released 2 weeks from now, and then the final book is going to be released 1 week after that. So Dark and the Night is going to be released. All of these books are going to be basically out in the span of a month.
Wow, that's incredible. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the results. They look really good. Congratulations. So this is the first one. This is Hunter of Shadow. Let's try to see the second one. Okay, this is not that fairy
That's it.
tale.
And again, it's a retelling of the Little Red Riding Hood, but with more of a
Okay,
dark fantasy key.
okay. And let's give a look to the third one.
And with this one, I have to be very straightforward with you. I don't think like I'm going to really sell a lot of them, but again, I'm more interested in the feedback that I got
Okay.
from these books.
Mhm. I think it's a really sound approach, and it's a really good way to try and learn as much as possible. I had this approach with translations. I am translating a really popular American novel, which is The Way of Edan by Philip Chase. And the first thing that Philip told me was, it is a popular novel. I am happy of what I am doing and the result that I got, but marketing is difficult to sell. Actually, sell those books is difficult. Are you sure? It is a nice. It's the best idea to try and translate it because it will take so much time, so much effort, and then try and marketing on in the Italian market. And I was really sincere with him, really straightforward. I told him, I like the book. I think I can do it justice because it is a specifically, it has a specific kind of prose. It is not, it is an easy read, but it's on a higher level than the usual epic fantasy story. And I told him, I want to learn. This is the best way for me to improve my craft in English. to try and steal your abilities there, because the way I will analyze the text by trying to translate it will be so much more specific, and the attention that I will deliver to the text will be much more specific than when I read it, and just because I want to enjoy my time there, or when I'm trying to give you a review. And my experience with that translation has affected immensely my writing in English. And as many people are saying, by judging by the reviews that I had on Goodreads for The Crimson Fire, it is actually working. So even if sometimes we have to sacrifice the amount of, we have to sacrifice a lot of time and effort there with very little result on the money side of things, that can be really beneficial as a way to learn. Because to be honest, I am too old to go back to sitting and studying in school in any kind of institution to try and learn how to write better in English. This is the best way for me to try and improve my craft. And I really respect what you're trying to do here with short stories with a really approachable price tag, and trying to give and to have a little bit of feedback to try and improve your craft that way. So yeah, good luck with that. Break a leg, how the actors say in the international market. And just a couple of questions to close this really nice time that we had today. How you are you a character writer? You consider yourself, because what you think of yourself is not always translate what with what readers think. As a character writer, or a world building plot and plot writer, what's your position and what you usually do with your story? You have different kind of novels too, so maybe that's changed in time.
I'm going to be again very straightforward with you and give it to you like it is. You will find a lot of authors that have dissected the way they write stories, so they will be able to answer to that question very easily. My answer is a bit more nuanced in the fact that there are part of the way I craft stories that are not really known to me. What do I mean by this? I mean, I'm just trying to be, I'm just trying to expose the way I craft stories as best I can, but there are some things that I can't explain. So bear with me because you are in for a ride. So basically what I do, the most important thing, it's not really plot and it's not characters, it's not pacing, it's none of these things. When I sit down, what I know is that I have a depth. I have a depth with the muse, and I need to fulfill this depth every single day.
Mhm.
So I sit down and I write. Most of the time, I don't really have a plan. And this is, many people that listen to this might be already spotting something that is not really good. And some of these same people, probably they are listening to this and they're pointing at me and they're saying, "Oh, you are a discovery writer or you're a pantser," right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what I am. What I know is that for me as a writer, what's important is to put in the time.
Okay.
And for that reason, I have an agenda. And what I usually do to understand if I was successful in a day is if I wrote at least 2 hours. If my
Mhm.
baseline is 2 hours, it means I was successful. I don't care what kind of characters I wrote. I don't care about the plot. I don't care even about the story that much. This might seem stupid, but again, I told you I'm going to
Mhm.
invite you to something that might sound a bit weird. But this is what happened in one day. What happened 1 week after that, 1 month after that, 6 months after that, is that I come up with the finished product.
Mhm.
So the way I explain this is uh, before I mentioned Stephen Pressfield, which is one of my favorite authors. He writes both nonfiction and fiction books. Gate of Fire is one of my favorite fiction books. The War of Art and No One Wants to Read Your Shit are two nonfiction books that he wrote, and I strongly suggest. And there is something that I found myself very in line with Stephen Pressfield on this. He also says something that might sound weird. He believes in the muse. In this era of AI and algorithm, it sounds a bit weird and maybe it might sound odd, but I do believe that for me, the most important thing is not the technical side of things, it's just putting in the time. And I
Okay.
know that if I can do that on a day-by-day basis, I will have a finished product in 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. I can't control that. So there are many colleagues, and you know that can write and publish a book every 6 weeks. They can do that, no problem.
Yeah.
They sit down, they outline the shit out of it, and in 6
Mhm.
weeks it's done. That is not something I can do, and it's not something I want to do. Because if I
Mhm.
do that, I will not do the things that have worked for me in the last 12 years. What
Mhm.
worked for me in the last 12 years is very simple. Put in the time. Put in the time. Put in the time. And there was actually, I told you I keep this agenda, and in every agenda, in this agenda or notebook, I will have, I will count the time in which every day I use to write something. So, for example, I actually want to show it to you if you want. I happen to
Yeah,
have it here.
absolutely.
So you probably not understand this, but this is the way I keep time. So
Okay,
this seems
okay.
like a prisoner, but that's basically every
Yeah.
single of those small line. It's 30
Uh-huh.
minutes. And then
Exactly.
you will see
Uh-huh.
there are some days in which I write. So there is the date, there is the amount of time that I use, and then there is, if I was sick, for example, and I couldn't write, I would write I was sick.
Mhm.
But those are usually rare days. So that's the system that works for me. And I'm sorry that I can't answer your question fully because
No,
it's
no,
not really,
it's interesting. It's weird, but it's interesting. You're in a toxic relationship with the muse.
yeah.
It's really nice.
I don't know if it's toxic, but definitely I think it's something that there aren't a lot of books that explain how to write or discovery write, if you want to use
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the most used basically term out there. But there
Mhm.
is one book that is called Writing into the Dark,
Mhm.
which is Wesley Smith wrote it, which is basically the only really book that try and teach you how to discovery write your way into a novel. And I found that is actually some of the closest thing to my writing
Mhm.
style that I could find out there. And Dean Wesley Smith is an author. I think he's 70 or something. He's a USA Today best-selling author. I think he wrote something like 100 novels. It's a very
Mhm.
established author out there. Um, and what he does with his book is he can both plot the book and both discovery write a book. But of all the writing books that I read and they didn't resonate with me, the one that somehow, in some part, because not 100% resonated with me, is Writing to the Dark. So that's regarding my writing style. Now, there is an answer to your question, actually, because I will know at the end when the book is done all the answer to the question you just asked me. So the character, the plot,
Mhm.
but only once the book is done will I have the answer to that
Mhm.
question
So it evolves in a
over there.
really organic way. It's a
You
really
could say
original
that, yeah.
approach. Yeah, that's interesting. That needs to be kind of explored, given that you started your experience as a writing thesis. I think there's something there that could be explored as something to, given the fact that there's not that much material to try and learn or to try and
Mhm.
to develop skills to be a writer that has this kind of approach. That could be something there on a publishing side. So I'm auto pitching yourself something about that. It could be interesting. So just the last question. So we close up. We're being here for more than 1 hour, so I want to respect your time. What's your the hardest lesson that you have learned during in your long residence in the marketing and writing side of things? There's something that a hard lesson that maybe you look at your past and tell yourself, I wish that someone explained that to me. There was something like that. What do you think? It could be useful for up and coming writers.
Sure. No one cares as much as you do. No one cares as much as you do, and this is more both on the positive side of thing
Mhm,
and negative. And no one cares as much as you do that your book is successful.
mhm,
No one cares as much as you do that your book fail or succeed. No one cares as much as you do if that review is good or bad.
mhm.
It's really related to what's your goal and what's your objective, because we are talking about somebody that want to sell books and want to be discovered and want to actually get the story out there. But there are a lot of writers that just want to write books for themselves and keep them for
Okay.
themselves, and there is nothing wrong with that. But if you want to do something similar to what we are striving to do, so try and get the books in as many of the right hands as possible. And then the approach, I think, is you have to write something, you have to publish something, you have to keep something in the market, and then you have to try to market it.
Mhm,
And this is something I didn't say. It's something that actually the author that I was mentioning, Wesley Smith, was mentioning. And also, these are the rules, the marketing rules of Heinlein,
mhm,
that says you have to write, you have to publish, you have to keep the damn thing in the market, and then you have to write the next thing.
mhm.
These are things I think are the best things that ever, let's say, happen when it comes to learning things in my author journey. They are very simple, but they're not super easy.
Yeah, yeah. On concept, they're really approachable, but to execute them it can be really, really difficult. So, what are you reading right now? And then we'll close this beautiful afternoon or morning if you're watching us from the
So,
US.
so one thing that I was noticing is not only I write in different genre, but I'm actually also reading different genres. Now I am in one of the rare streaks in which I'm writing the same genre. So two books that are both science fiction is
Mhm,
actually I wanted to show you, because I nowadays I'm doing something that not many people would do. So writing from his phone, and I have an app that allows me to reading.
mhm.
But one of the things that I'm really enjoying is that I can bring this everywhere I want,
Okay.
and I don't have to have my Kindle. I don't have to have, and with this one, I can also listen to
Okay.
audiobooks. So there is one of the book that I'm reading is from Michael Manmay, and is Planet Side.
Okay. I have this on my wish
This one is
list.
actually
How is it?
this one is really good, and is you if you try and put it in a genre, libraries and we will put into the in a specific genre that is the military and science
Mhm,
fiction. That's the genre it's in. But I find that it has a lot of subgenre inside it, like the mystery
mhm,
genre, some part of noir, and it's written in first person. And the character that is telling the story is really, really, really relatable. It's really funny. So I find myself very interested in knowing how it goes. This is the second time I'm actually reading
mhm.
this. There is Planet Side, the Space Side, and Colony Side. It's a trilogy, and I believe he just wrote the fourth one, which I need to definitely
Okay.
read. Very interesting. There isn't anything groundbreaking in the
Mhm,
way it has been written, but I find that one of the strength of this book is the main character, is the narrator, which is which is which has a very strong personality. And then the other thing that I'm writing now is from the master, we can say, Kim Stanley
mhm.
Robinson, which is Red
Yeah.
Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars, is the Mars trilogy. I'm reading the Planet Side, I'm reading it in English, and I'm reading the Mars trilogy in Italian. So it would be Il Rosso di Marte, Il Verde di Marte, Il Blu di Marte. And this one is really more of a different genre, more complex. It's definitely something that you are going to need to digest
Is that
in
solar
order to
punk?
understand, because
Is
sorry.
that solar punk? Like the Ministry for the
No,
Future?
this one would be more on the space
Okay.
opera kind of things,
Mm.
and it's set between 2040 2100,
Okay.
so in the nearish future. But it was written, I think 20,
Yeah,
30 years ago, so it's written with a different genre in mind. But it is, for me, the closest we'll ever get to Mars in some respect, because it describes very well how a colonization of the red planet could go. And so I definitely recommend that if you are a fan of the older style kind of science fiction, even though it's in the 90s, but the writing style is different. You need to be able to digest it. But for me, there are some great concepts explored in a way that I don't really find a lot nowadays in books.
That's really interesting. So Michael Mann it's a staple for military sci-fi and space opera, and we can say the same thing about Kim Stanley Robinson, even if I think that he's writing different stuff today. But yeah, those are really interesting. And Michele, this was a really, really fun interview, because we've been orbiting each other around for many years, but we seldom have the ability to spend a little bit of time just to chat about books or the craft or our experience in the marketing and writing of things. So thank you for being here. It's been a real pleasure. And all of you, go check out Michele's work. You find everything on Amazon. You have the website, which is micheleamitrani.com, right? .com, micheleamitrani.com. If you're interested in science fiction, mythological retelling, you have a lot of stuff there. His back catalog is pretty well populated. And if you want to be in touch, you find him on Instagram and Facebook. You don't have an X account. You encourage you to be there to find us there, or on Blue Sky maybe. And yeah, go check out all of his stuff. And whenever you have something new to discuss and new up and coming books, we'll discuss them freely and happily here. And remember, every one of you, if you're interested in science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. If you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. Thank you. We'll see you in the next one. Ciao, Michele.
And good luck for the